Welcome to the Monsters in Monona 2023 recap video. I'll talk a bit about how I prepared for the meet, how I felt going into it, and then how the meet itself went. About 3 months out from the event, right after I'd signed up actually, I dislocated my right shoulder, completing a 1 rep max on Hatfield squats. This had obviously a pretty big impact on my physical training for the event, as well as my mental preparation and mindset going in. I decided basically like the day after this that I was going to compete one way or another, even if it meant attempting as many events as possible using just one arm. I didn't think it was necessarily going to be that bad, but I went in knowing that I was going to have some hurdles to cross if I was going to do my best job. So luckily for me, most of the events, besides obviously the overhead press, are not very shoulder dependent, so I was able to start training most of them very early on, and I was able to compete in all of them but the overhead press at a pretty high level, with the dislocated shoulder not getting in the way that much. My intention going into the meet was to train all the events at least once a week for about 3 months before the meet, so 12 total practices on each event. Dislocated my shoulder right when I was about to start, kind of put a hamper on that. I was not able to train a lot of the events for about a month or so I was down to 8 weeks to prep, and even then, for the first couple weeks, I wasn't really able to give my all on some of the events because the shoulder wasn't still quite at the level it needed to be. Of those 8 weeks, due to other things coming up, I got maybe an average 6 sessions in for each event. So that's 6 times practicing each of the 4 events that I was planning to compete in. I decided early on that there was a 0% chance I could do the overhead press, so I put no effort into even trying. I took that effort and I put it into the remaining 4 events, which were the yoke squat, the farmer's walk, the bag over bar, and the yoke walk into sled pull. I had no methodology for my prep. All I did was go out into my driveway once a week or twice a week if I felt like splitting up the events, and I took each event and practiced it with the full competition weight one time. I didn't have any kind of progressive overload, I didn't have any kind of training methodology or progression. I just practiced the events as I would be doing them in competition, and I did that roughly once a week. I don't think there's anything wrong with this methodology. I think this is what the vast majority of strongmen do, in fact. The only thing that I would have changed to done better had I not dislocated my shoulder is I would have gotten the full 12 weeks in and I would have gotten more total sessions practicing. Because that's all this really is. You're not really building strength. Either you have the strength or you don't. You're building a strength in all the rest of your training. This is just getting some practice on these specific events because some of them do have technical aspects that you want to be prepared for without going in blind. So some thoughts I had in the events as I was preparing for the yoke squat. I didn't really like the description of this event. It was 60 seconds, only 480 pounds. You did not start under the yoke, so you had to take time to get under and get set. And then there were up and down commands, which I wasn't sure how strict they were going to be with those. And it just felt like so much time was being eaten up by the rules that it wouldn't really be any kind of competition. Everyone was going to get the same amount of reps because anyone competitive was going to be repping this out the entire time. It's only 480 pounds for a half squat, and the deciding factor was just going to be whoever had the faster calls by the judge, and that kind of just struck me wrong. It didn't end up being that way, but that was basically what I was thinking the entire time I was preparing for this event. Next up was the farmer's walk, which this year was for total distance with turns and no drops. Again, I was kind of angry at this event, not because I thought it was a bad rule, but just because the turns themselves were very frustrating for me. I did not get them. With those handles, as you do a turn with any kind of speed, after you fully turn, the handles keep turning because they're very heavy, and that's just kind of how momentum works. So they'd kind of wrench out your hands, the handles would twist in front of you and get in the way of your feet, and all around it's just a big mess. And the best I'd ever done in practice was about 3 lengths of my driveway, which is about 3 lengths of the competition distance, and I'd get that third turn in. I just barely get around and drop instantly because my hands just had the bars wrenched right out of them. Bags were fine. I didn't have any real complaints about that event. The bags are light and the height was not super high, so it was also a speed competition, but I knew that going in, so I just really focused on hammering down a single swing throw versus doing some warm swings because I knew that if I had to do warm swings, I was not going to go fast enough to win. Last up was a yoke walk into a sled drag, which once again, pretty straightforward. No complaints about how the event was set up. I was not great at yoke walks to begin with, and I'm still not great at them, but yeah, it was an easy thing to train, very low fatigue, and I felt just fine about that event. All that said, going into the competition the last couple of weeks, I did not have very high hopes. I had taken a trip 2 weeks before, which kind of cut out that week's training session. And then when I tried to get my final training sessions in the week before, they were just not good. Pretty much all the training I've been doing for strongman or just in general, those couple of weeks was just all feeling very weak. And I felt pretty demotivated. For instance, the farmer's walk I attempted the Wednesday before the competition, I made it 2 lengths of my driveway, which is about the shortest I'd ever done, so I did not have high hopes going into the competition, and I was not really feeling very good mentally. But I wasn't exactly planning on winning anyways, seeing as I just looked at my shoulder, and I knew from the get-go that I was just going for fun, so I tried to put a smile on my face and just do the best I could. So I'll note here that I have very limited video from the actual competition, so I'm just going to be talking over some pictures for a while, because I just don't have the B-roll to put behind a lot of talking I plan on doing, so I apologize for that, just, bear with it. That morning I got there and I weighed in and measured in. They actually measured me at 6'6", which is about an inch taller than I actually am. I think the shoes I was wearing and the fact that I was standing extra tall, and that bumped me up a height category for the yoke squat, meaning I got a yoke that was 2 inches higher, which I think definitely helped a lot, because once you start getting high on squats, even a little bit extra height really goes a long way to making them much easier. I did not even attempt the first event, which was the press medley. I knew there was about no chance I could do it, so I told the organizer I was just skipping the event, and I started in last place with 0 points. A quick note for those of you who are unfamiliar with how strongman is scored: it goes off a point system where the number of points you get for each event is inverse to your place relative to the number of competitors there, which in simpler terms means if there are 13 people competing in a class, as there were on this event, first place would get 13 points, second place 12 points, third place 11 points, and so on. The winner of the meet in general being whoever has the most points at the end. So it kind of goes without saying that starting with 0 points when first place got 13 is a pretty big hole to dig yourself out of. I will also note that most meets go by the opposite of current place when it comes to who goes first. So first place gets to go last, which adds a little bit of benefit of knowing exactly how much you need to do to win, and last place of course going first, which leads me to the video of my squats. Being tied for last with everyone else who zeroed the press event, I got to go first on the squats, which meant that I had no idea how many reps I needed to win, so I figured I should do as many as possible to A, secure my position, and B, demoralize everyone that had to go after me. The judges were very quick with the up and down commands to the point where it was basically touch and go, which is very good for me because that's where I excel, so I was able to keep repping it out for the entire time period and get much higher reps than anything I'd done in practice because I was taking much longer pauses at the top and bottom then. I landed at 24 total reps. I think I had a 25th rep that I didn't count because it jumped the down command, but that was a pretty substantial lead, and I ended up taking first place as no one came really anywhere close to that. Second place got 19, and third and fourth tied with 16 reps, I believe. At this point, I had 13 total points, which left me in 8th place overall, so I managed to jump up about half the rankings by getting first place on the second event. This event completely wiped me out, so I was glad that there was about an hour between this event and the farmer's walk for me. I was very nervous going into the farmer's walk considering how poorly I had done in practice just a few days before, but I figured, well, I should try and do the best I can, and the higher quality handles that I was using in the event, and the fact that I guess I just had some extra competition adrenaline and the real drive to go all the way meant that I did much better than I was hoping. I managed to make it 4 total lengths, which was the farthest of anyone in any class, and secured another first place position. I will note that I saw someone in one of the earlier classes do this kind of figure 8 pattern, and that seemed like it made a lot of sense for kind of going with the bar twist versus fighting it, so I tried to incorporate that the best I could, and I think it helped a little bit. At this point, I was at 26 total points and 5th place overall. Now at this point, I felt pretty nervous going into the bags because having 2 first places in a row meant that I had a good chance of actually doing very well, so now I had more to lose, and I knew that on the bags, even a tiny little hitch would cost that half second that would cost me potentially multiple places, so I was really worried about just flubbing anything. So I did what I did for the last 2 events, and I basically turned off my brain going into it. I didn't think about how I was going to throw the bags, I just went up and I didn't try to step back. I didn't look to see if the bags were going to make before going to the next one. I just launched each bag as far as I humanly could, and that seemed to do the job. I think the fact that I didn't even hesitate to see if the bag was going to go over before going to the next one was which got me the win, because I think the gap between first place and second was less than a second. At this point, I had 39 total points, which put me in second place overall, and I knew going into the last event that even if I got first place, I could still potentially lose by half a point if the current first place person had gotten second place. So I had a chance to win all, but it was not guaranteed no matter how good I did. Going into the last event, I knew how the scores were working and what I had to do. I needed to get first, and the current first place person could not. So I went second to last because I was in second place, and I got a time of 22 point something, and that was enough to lead the pack at the time, which only left the current first place person to do his run, and if he was able to beat the current second place and take second, or beat me and take first, he would have won overall. The last event ends up being about as much a nail biter as possible. When the first place person did his final run, he was actually able to get a 22-second run that was slightly slower than mine, which would have gotten him second place and the overall win. But he did slide the yoke over the line versus clearing it entirely before dropping it, which resulted in a 2-second time penalty, which got him a 24-second run and third place, losing him the victory by half a point. I ended the day having taken first place in 4 back-to-back events, which was very good. I managed to sweep everything that I actually participated in, and despite that, I still only got first place overall by half a point, and it took a penalty call to get there. So it really goes to show that a 0 is damn near a death sentence in a strongman competition. The only way I could possibly win was to do everything perfectly and have the second best person flub up a little bit. And even then, had there been another very dominant person who had taken, say, second place in all those other events, they would have completely trounced me in total points. So next year, I definitely want to get at least a few press reps in, because that'll give me tons more breathing room. And yeah, I had a great time. I will definitely compete again next year. I don't really consider myself a strongman, but it's still fun to try once a year. Finally, I want to thank everyone who took the time to watch this video, all 12 minutes of it. I hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully I can make an even better recap video next year where I take first place in all 5 events. Unlikely, but we can always hope. I will see you all real soon.